But are they really that destructive? They are. They're dangerous in terms of giving an option that will marginalize groups of people even more and remove opportunity from students who have a lot to offer. We need to make sure that we are including every voice in our education system, including every voice in our culture, because it is essential. It is essential to our development. It is essential to make sure that we have those opportunities. And by using ability labels, we are being destructive. We are removing voices from that system, and they're destructive and not equitable. Hello, and welcome to the Learning Success Podcast, brought to you by Deo Mwano Consultancy. We're here to support you as educators by providing practical insights in order to help you build a healthy learning environment. My name is David, and today we're going to be discussing the danger of ability labels in educational systems. So in this podcast, what I want to do is I want to talk about an official statement that was put out by the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. I'm a math teacher, and the NCTM is an amazing guide on a lot of different fronts. And their statement on the use and danger of ability labels, I think, is really, really important. This was put out in November of 2023. And in this podcast, what I want to do is just kind of talk through what are ability labels. You may not even really be aware that we're in an educational system that uses them prevalently, and what is the impact. But then kind of walk through some of the main points of NCTM's statement, which is ability labels aren't accurate. They aren't equitable, and they just don't reinforce what we're actually doing in education. At the end of the podcast, I want to talk about how we get rid of ability labels. If they're so dangerous, how do we get rid of them? And that is not a quick fix. And so that will just be a start of a conversation that will be lasting a very, very long time. So let's jump right in. First, let's talk about what are ability labels. What are we talking about? Ability labels are used extensively in mathematics, which is why the NCTM put out an official statement. But they're used across the board in the educational system. Ability labels are any time we label a course or any really course of study or any curriculum as being either low or high. Now, that can take many, many different forms. And in fact, I think the educational system has been aware of this internally, that this is an issue. There's been a lot of research done. And we've tried to kind of massage those terms a little bit to make them a little more palatable. It has not worked because the essence of the ability label is the issue. We could say, oh, well, we have A-level classes and B-level classes and C-level, or we have a college track level and a career track level. All of those things are saying the same thing. So whatever it is, I'm sure you can think back to high school, to middle school. And you can imagine whatever it was that your high school used, and think about the environment that you're in now. What is it that your educational environment uses? Perhaps your children are in the educational system and thinking about because it takes different forms, but they all are really saying the same thing, which is that what we're doing in these different classes is either different or for different people. And the effects of those ability labels are really, really damaging. So the next question then is why? Why would that be so damaging? Some students are high and some students are low. And that's why they're so damaging, is because they inform us incorrectly about the nature of learning, the nature of students. Here's what NCTM says. Ability labels are widely used in education, and especially in mathematics education. They are connected to cultural beliefs that frame mathematical ability and other ability. I think that this goes across the board as innate and fixed, positioning some people as, quote unquote, good at insert subject and others bad at the subject. And I think that this is so ingrained in us, especially in mathematics, which is my discipline. But whatever discipline you teach, I'm sure you have encountered this sort of just deeply ingrained understanding that I'm just not good at this. That with no exploration of what it means to be good at that, what that is. And I think that is one reason why they're so problematic, is because they're so invasive into our thoughts as saying, and what does that actually say? I'm bad at math. I mean, that is let's not use math because that's my discipline, but let's say something like reading comprehension. So I'm bad at reading comprehension. Well, now I have a preconceived notion of what reading comprehension is, what makes me successful at reading comprehension, and I can't get past that. What I'm really saying is that's not something that I can improve on. I mean maybe, but I'm bad at this. So maybe, but that would be an accident if I did good at this. And I think that's why they're so problematic at large. There's more to talk about here in the podcast, but why they are so dangerous just in general is because it puts you in a mindset that classifies what the situation is already, what the discipline entails, and how you're going to approach it. It closes you off to all of those things. And I would encourage, at this point, just kind of talking about this, again, there's a lot more to talk about, but just while we're talking about these labels, so I would encourage all people in education and everyone who is listening in all of life to remove that type of language from your vocabulary. It is very damaging. I'll speak from an educator's perspective, as someone who has been in front of, countless students, classrooms, tutoring sessions. My main goal is to get people to believe in themselves, to be able to tackle a problem and say, you know what, I'm going to try this. And then at the end of that, be astounded at what they did. I'm trying to get a student to climb a mountain. And the single thing that cuts that down is when a student says, well, I'm not good at this. I'm bad at math. Or they've heard that from other people. They've heard that narrative to say, I'm bad at this. It makes my job so much harder because I have to now reframe this, that it's not, oh, well, people aren't good or bad at this, that this is just difficult. Mathematics is very difficult. It's a very challenging subject. And so you're going to struggle with this because it's difficult, like climbing a mountain. People don't say, well, I'm really good at climbing mountains, or I'm terrible at climbing mountains. Well, we don't have that language necessarily. People say, oh, I trained for climbing, or man, that was really difficult, or, I had to stop quite a few times, things like that. That's the kind of language, and that's the language that we need to use in education. We need to make sure, and I'll be the first to admit, I find, for example, I do find reading comprehension sort of difficult at times, staying focused when I'm reading. And I got called out the other day. I literally said I'm bad, or I think it was writing, maybe something long. I literally said I'm bad at writing, and my wife literally called me out and said, "You can't say that." And so I had to apologize, and I had to say, you know what, I'm going to change my. That is really difficult for me, and that's what I would say. That's the language that I think is so much more helpful. I mean, it's really damaging. I've sat in a lot of meetings, IEP meetings, and meetings with students and parents where other educators use that kind of language, and they'll say, "Well, I wasn't good at math either when I was in school." And, my heart always just like is full when, when I hear that, to be like, ooh, I wish I could have been there for you as well, to say, no, you're doing great at this. You're not bad at this. It's just difficult. It's a struggle. So I would really encourage, whatever discipline it is that you teach, that, and whatever discipline you're talking about, when you talk about those things, make sure that you use that language to say, this is difficult. I find this challenging. Because honestly, that is more what we mean. That is actually what's, that this is challenging, but I have to, I have to work really hard at that. I have to make sure that I have the right resources to be able to do that. That switch is so easy to make, and it's so important. So yeah, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about ability labels, right? We're talking about, ingrained in our culture, in the words that we use, and also the classes that we actually offer to students. We're giving students this narrative that you are bad at this, you are good at this, or you are somewhere in the middle of this, or whatever it might be, and that's an issue, because it sets students off on the wrong tone. You're not good or bad at this. You're trying to do something which is really, really difficult, and you are struggling at that because it is really difficult. And instead of just kind of closing yourself off and saying, I'm not good at this, think about, hey, what resources do you have to have that might be different than other people that can actually help you with that? So I want to move on now. So talked about why, hopefully I made the case for why they're problematic. It's an issue. These ability labels do not create the right narrative. I want to move on to the second point that NCTM makes in their statement, which is that ability labels aren't accurate. They're not really stating what's actually going on. Aside from creating a narrative that is hurtful, they're just not really accurate, to be honest. I mean, that's not really correct. Here's what NCTM says. It says, ability labels obstruct our capacity to notice and build on the varied forms of knowledge that students bring to school and the varied ways that they need support. I think all of us are going to agree with this. I think that this is something like, yeah, this is how I see this. Rather than accept ability labels at face value, then, we must consciously work to challenge the idea that abilities can be summed up with few words or numbers. We must consciously work to develop more multifaceted and hence more accurate understandings of children, their current abilities, and their vast potential. Oh, that is really amazing. And I think it captures the heart of what that, like, yes, this is what we want instead. It is heartbreaking. I think when we hear this, this captures what we really know about students' abilities. It is so heartbreaking to talk to a student and they'll use this language that they did not invent themselves, right? They'll use language like, I'm a C-level student, or I'm in a low-level math class. That is not capturing how I see this student. And we need to think about that. Thinking ahead to the end of the podcast about, okay, well, how do we fix this? We're not there yet. We're still kind of trying to understand this whole thing. But, are we creating, is this really how we're viewing students? I don't think so. I don't think that there's administrators who are thinking, yeah, this is how this works. When we're seeing students holistically, we just need to make sure that the language that we're using around the classes that they're taking, the curriculum that they're taking, that they don't see themselves as that. I mean, how much better would it be than a student who says, I'm a C-level student, or I'm a low-level student, or high level, or let's not just say low level. I'm an honors student. What is that really saying? But if they understood themselves holistically, they said, hey, this subject is really difficult for me, but I'm making sure that I have the resources to be able to address some of the concerns that I have, and also reinforce the positive ways that I can work through this. Doesn't that capture what we're really trying to get at? So I think that the point here is that these ability labels aren't doing the job. Aside from being problematic because they're not the language that we want to give to students, they're not framing that, they just really aren't accurate with what we're seeing. We're seeing each student as individual with all kinds of strengths and weaknesses. That's what being a human is all about. All these different nuances, and you get together and you think and you say, oh, I never thought about that, or hey, I've seen that before, things like that. This is how the human experience works. Well, ability labels don't really describe that whatsoever. So the next thing, they're problematic. They're not accurate. They're not really realistic. They're that right there is like, well, yeah, this is not doing the job. Here's something that MCTM definitely has in their statement. And I think that, it's important obviously to talk about because there is a bigger issue. They are not just not accurate, although they are not. They're not just problematic, although they are. The next thing that NCTM highlights is ability labels aren't equitable. They're destructive, and specifically destructive for certain populations. So this research is extensive. You can just do a Google search if you wanted to, and you'll find all of this research. If you want someone specific, you can look up the research of Rosalind Mickelson. But many other people have also done research on this and consistently found that, and this is, I'm reading now from the statement here, that African American and Latinx students are disproportionately assigned to lower track classes and special education, while white and Asian students are disproportionately assigned to higher tracks and gifted programs. This research is extensive. It is out there. I would encourage you to look that up. They go on by saying low tracked students are persistently denied access to ambitious teaching and learning, further exacerbating inequities within schools as well as in college admission and graduation rates. These ability labels, while problematic and inaccurate, also create a system of inequity. It creates a system that does have lower level tracks, which then creates not as many opportunities, which creates less curriculum being taught. If there is a difference, let's just start there. Let's just say that if there is a difference between a low level and a high level, like if those exist, then there's a difference between the low level and the high level. And the research is out, definitively out, that these lower tracks are being disproportionately assigned, and it's an issue that we need to address. So if before this you were sort of like, well, I don't know, maybe they're not exactly describing anything, but describing what we see in our school, but are they really that destructive? They are. They're dangerous in terms of giving an option that is that we can that will marginalize groups of people even more, and remove opportunity from students who have a lot to offer. We need to make sure that we are including every voice in our education system, including every voice in our culture, because it is essential. It is essential to our development. It is essential to make sure that we have those opportunities. And by using ability labels, we are being destructive. We are removing voices from that system, and they're destructive and not equitable. So the final thing is really just kind of summing up, sort of this whole topic is that ability labels don't reinforce the joy that learning actually is. I think by assigning these labels of low, medium, high, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, whatever it might be, that we are reducing what would be what otherwise be a really exciting course of study into essentially we have a predetermined amount of things that you need to know, and you are either going to work through those really, really quickly, the way that we want you to work through them, or you are not. Disregarding any sort of background that you might bring or personal strengths or weaknesses. And what it does is, these ability labels also just, incorrectly reinforce this just sort of rote learning where we're just getting through just to be able to take the class. We get done with it, and we either got whatever we were supposed to get out of it or didn't get out what we were supposed to get out of it. But really at the end of it, we can't really show any sort of, competency or any sort of growth because it really wasn't designed that way. It wasn't designed with growth in mind. It was designed as these, this set of objectives that were going to be met, or not. And, and that's the result. We've just kind of, had an assembly line of just sort of, different objectives that had to be met and then kind of spit out the product at the end. So, I think by removing ability labels, we can put more joy back into, back into learning. For example, I'll just use math as an example because, I know it so well. How many of us, when we think of mathematics, when that word, you think of math, how many of you think of, well, number one, you think of mathematics class in high school or middle school or elementary school. And you think of like the math problems that you were doing. That's what you think of, right? Because it was designed that way. It was designed that way to think of math is this, or we could even say, book reports or reading or other disciplines, lab reports, things like that. We think of those, and when we think of those academically, we think of just the times tables or the whatever objective had to be met, and then we just kind of say, well, I was bad at that, I was good at that, right? It all reinforces each other, rather than if we're removing those labels, and we're creating a system where mathematics really means learning. It really means it really just in essence means how we actually think and how we process and how we work through problems. That's really what mathematics means. And so we could actually get back to those essence of like, hey, how did you do with this this problem? How did you think through that? What's the way that you think through it? How could you think differently about that? We could really get back to the joy of learning and be able to be able to actually understand, what that's like. I used to use a phrase when I taught high school of, I always tried to kind of be light and funny and helping students, realize, I would say right off the bat, I just want to make sure that you know this. I don't think that people are good at math or bad at math. I think that people can grow and math is really difficult. And so you're going to struggle with different things and you're going to like different things. And I always said that, my goal for the end of this class is that at the end of this year, that instead of saying I'm bad at math, you'll just realize which kind of math that you like and which kind of math that you don't. And just helping students to really understand that, these topics that we're exploring cannot be boiled down to, just a set of, something that can be labeled as high level, low level, medium level, things like that. We're really talking about topics that are going to be at all kinds of different levels. And I think that that's so much more of what students are looking for. I've found that, when students are given that choice, it feels so much better. It feels so much better to say that they're relieved, that they can say, okay, I'm so glad that I don't, the only narrative I have is I'm bad at this. But they have more language around saying, you know what, I really enjoyed when we did this in class. or I really enjoy, I found myself thinking about this this weekend. Or the other way around, saying, boy, my brain is having trouble, is really confused at this. I need some more resources. Having that sort of language is so much more freeing for students and so much more, really, like I said, reinforcing that joy that learning really should be. Well, if ability labels are problematic, if they're not accurate, inequitable, dangerous, and they're not really getting at what we want to get at, how do we get rid of them? And this is absolutely not going to be easy. Ability labels have been around for a long time, and they are baked in to our system. Not only the way we understand certain subjects, certain topics, but the way that our educational system assigns certain students. But we do need to do something about it. We need to make sure it is not going to be an easy road to get rid of these labels, but it absolutely has to happen. And so we all need to make sure that we're doing our part in order to get rid of them. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be as easy as just removing them. I've talked to quite a few people about this topic, and everyone really in education, and everyone really has the same response, which is like, oh yeah, I agree. And then they always think, well, what does that look like if we don't have those? And I think that's realistic. That is very realistic. You cannot just remove, like, even if you're like, hey, I am on board with this. I'm ready to move, ready to take action. You cannot just go in as an administrator, as a superintendent, as a curriculum coordinator, and just say, okay, we're just going to remove all these because the system has been set up so that those are necessary to what's happening. I think the big piece is that we make sure, though, that we take steps in the right direction. This is what NCTM says. It says, undoing the harms of ability labeling is not just an issue of changing our language or implementing a standardized set of best practices or policies, right? It's not just those things. We do have to change our language. We do have to change a lot of what we're changing. But it says it requires sustained action and ongoing learning at every level of our educational system. Here's the hard part, is that this is going to take a generational change. This is going to take like they said, a constant and sustained action towards getting away from this, of not understanding education in this way, that people are good at certain things, that people are bad at certain things. And so here's the good class, here's the bad class, and that's what you're in. We need to change that whole structure, and that's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be overnight. But by changing language, by making sure that we are educating students, not just on a classroom level, but on a whole department level, on a whole school level. Like, this is how we view students. This is what we're going to be doing. Educating students, listening to students by actually talking to them. We can make a difference. We can make a difference, and making sure that we don't just say, well, that's too big. We can't tackle that. Here's the other thing that NCTM says, which I think is worth noting. It says, research has shown how easily well-intentioned reforms may end up perpetuating the same systems that they are supposed to disrupt. If we just try to say, okay, now we're just going to do this now, do away with that. The educational fad of the century, of the week, like, okay, now we're going to do this instead. We need to be very careful. Because that research has shown that does not have the effect that we want it to have. Just the opposite. It says meaningful change then is not about following steps by rote, but about building collective capacity as educators in partnership with students and families for navigating the ongoing challenges of disrupting ability labels and building on students' strengths. This is not and cannot be a set of just things that you implement in your district or you implement in your school or in your classroom. This is going to have to be something that is done in partnership with students, helping families, talking and understanding where students are at, right? That's the essence of what we're doing, right? Is seeing students as not just an ability label, but actually as a person. And so in order to change that and actually make that more meaningful, we need to actually, treat students and parents and as individuals, as humans, as people who have strengths and weaknesses and who are not defined as one ability. Well, I don't pose. I'm not trying to act like I know how to. And like I said, that's not the goal of this podcast. Is to say, okay, implement these 3 easy steps, and you will remove ability labels. This is a part of not only a bigger discussion, but a bigger action item. I mean, I would encourage you to talk about this. I mean, number one, talk about it with your classrooms. Talk about it with your administrators. Talk about it. Bring it up and don't stop bringing it up. But make sure that you're actually creating an environment too where you can evaluate some of these things and say to students, how does this make you feel? How do you feel different? What is this? What else could we do? And taking that data and bringing that to your school or your department. But I thought, because I was trying to think about, how do we end this then, right? So you can't just say, okay, well, thanks for joining us. End there. Good luck with all that. This quote is really great, and I think NCTM did a great job of putting together this end quote at the end of their statement, which I think is a great one to end with. I'll end with this quote here, and just kind of let your brain to think about this. But just to recap before I read the quote, we talked about ability labels. They're not accurate. They're inequitable, very dangerous in our world, in our culture. And they really just aren't reinforcing the positive facets of learning and education. And for all of those reasons, they're extremely problematic, and we need to get rid of them. It's not a choice. We need to do this. We can't let this pass us by. So let me end with this quote here. NCTM says this: making sense of the problems with ability labeling and with more inclusive ways of thinking, acting, designing, and structuring education is not easy. Hierarchical and exclusionary ways of understanding mathematics and mathematical ability, and you can read whatever discipline you're involved in, are deeply ingrained in the cultural assumptions and systems that dominate our society. Rejecting ability labels is a necessary part of dismantling these harmful assumptions and systems to create in their place a world in which each and every student thrives in and through their mathematics education and education in general, in which mathematics is a more powerful tool for supporting flourishing life on our planet. We invite educators, youth, policymakers, researchers, and families to imagine such a world and what it would mean to them, and to ask together, what can we do to make our imagined worlds real? By building on the full range of knowledge, questions, and goals that people have in all of our diversity, we can create new possibilities for ourselves and for future generations. So I'll just leave you with this: is what are you going to do about dismantling ability labels in your school? Think about what this looks like for you. If this is something that you can get on board with, and you can say, I'm passionate about this. This is a problem. What are you going to do to envision this world that really needs to happen and we all want? Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you found something helpful, please share this podcast with a colleague, and please subscribe to the channel as well. See you next time.